The trade deadline has come and gone for the Utah Jazz, and it left us in a little bit of an uncertain waters. Now, I had my own video in which I discussed the understanding that I have of it. However, it was brought to my attention by Tayin, a member of the channel family, that there is something a little bit more interesting that another face of sports news actually considered there to be going on underneath the surface. With that being said, Tatum alluded to this at the beginning of the season, but it kind of flew under the radar until it was brought back up and thrown in our faces now with Danny Ainge's recent decisions with the Utah Jazz. We're going to go ahead and take a little bit of a deep dive down into this thought process and find out exactly how important the decisions that Danny made during the trade deadline can potentially end up affecting not just the direction of the team, but the feelings of the players towards the team and the organization as a whole. Thanks for tuning in this video. It's your boy Wraith Hoops. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications if you like the Utah Jazz. And subscribe to the main channel to get videos about other teams. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this one. First, I'd like to apologize for my hair. I know it seems a little bit dysfunctional, but when I saw this take, honestly, I couldn't turn myself away from it, and the video just had to go up today. We're gonna go ahead and take this little bit of a deep dive. Now, the title of the article is Opinion: Unintended Consequences of Trades Could Cause the Utah Jazz to Struggle in Rebuilding. Now, this was posted by Sarah Todd of the Deseret News, and actually it created a very interesting thought process because by title alone, it implies that there could be something underlying that we just haven't addressed. And lo and behold, it was a dynamic that I actually didn't consciously think about when we experienced the trade deadline live. It's the fact that the players have opinions, and as humans and not just, CPU characters, it puts them in a position to where they have to react to things going on the fly, and they have feelings and emotions about it as well that could have long-term implications for their decisions as far as building with the team, staying with the team and re-signing, and also how they look at the front office and whether or not the front office actually has their back. Now, she starts out saying that in a vacuum, she understands what the Utah Jazz did at the trade deadline. She said directly, "You prioritize capital and flexibility over short-term middling success in the hope that the assets you have will put you in a position to be able to form a team that is destined for true title contention," which is fairly accurate judging by what ended up occurring because, again, we traded away 3 key rotation pieces: Ochai Agbaji, Kelly Olynyk, and Simone Fontecchio. That puts us in a situation to where you have the expectation that by trading those guys away, you would like to get some serious value back. Now, it did turn into a first and a second round pick, as well as some expiring contracts and one player, Gabriel Pajita, who's actually still playing in the EuroLeague at the moment, but does have some surprising upside, though he is a raw talent at the moment. But it also puts you in a situation where you wonder what was the point of the trade, because at the beginning of the season, you saw this team play and they looked really rough. I still thought this team had the potential to go into the playoffs as high as the 6th seed. And once Will Hardy ended up fixing out the rotation, we saw them be the team that they potentially could have been from the beginning. They were playing their best ball to the point where they won 20 out of 29 games, but then the trade deadline came. And in a situation where we were under the impression that we would be buyers and sellers, instead we were put in a situation where we were just sellers. And this quote perfectly expresses what we can only assume Danny was thinking about and what was going through his mind when he decided to go ahead and pull the trigger on these deals. Because in my head, when I was watching over the news, watching Shams and Woj break the topics, it made sense that there would be another blow up trade that was going to come up and it would make the two make sense. Why would we trade away some key rotation pieces and not get somebody big back in return, even if it was in a third deal? However, much to my dismay and many other people's dismay, the third deal never came. There was no big play. There was no DeJounte Murray. There was no Mikal Bridges. It was just Kevin Knox and company. With that being said, no matter how you feel about those pieces, we can all understand that even if they were decent players, because they're not exactly great players that would be on championship contending teams, it still puts you in a position to where you're looking at it from the outside in, understanding that they're going to have to get adjusted to the system that John Collins individually already took over half the season to get accustomed to on defense at the very least. And then also on top of that, they have to mesh well with the players that already have a level pecking order that involves a certain level of egoless basketball, but also has a complete understanding that Lauri Markkanen and Collin Sexton are two of the guys that really make the team go, and Chris Dunn is that unsung leader, particularly on the defense side of the ball. With that being said, said, it would make sense that they wouldn't want to end up paying out Fontecchio's contract extension that they would have at the end of the season, because again, they would have the opportunity, as he would be a restricted free agent, so they could match anybody's deal that came up. Danny Ainge isn't particularly known to significantly overpay, but he might have overpaid a little bit for Fontecchio. With that being said, he eliminated the problem altogether by trading him away. With that being said, you saw a situation where Kelly Olynyk ended up getting shipped out and they wanted a first round draft pick in exchange. They were able to get a couple pieces back, but it wasn't enough, so they threw Agbaji into the trade as well, and that turned into a first round pick as well as a couple expiring contracts. Whether you feel as though Ochai Agbaji had the ability to honestly be on this roster when they became championship contenders, the fact remains that they decided that he was not going to be part of that future picture. They felt that he did not make the second year leap that they were hoping to within the role that they gave him, but I was a proponent for him having more opportunities once they traded Fontecchio. It made the most sense, and he would finally be able to decide and prove whether he is just a simple two-dimensional 3-and-D player, whether he can do both of those things extremely well and just hasn't had the opportunity due to his inconsistent minutes, or if he just wasn't worth what we thought he was going to be worth. But they decided to go ahead and pull the trigger early in that front office and send him to Toronto. Now, the thing that I really want to touch on that she really made a point to hammer home in this article was with this quote right here. She says, "Mainly, I worry about the mindset of the Jazz most important foundational pieces and the message the Jazz's approach sends to the rest of the league. If the Jazz intent is to secure a top 10 pick in the upcoming draft, otherwise that pick would be owed to Oklahoma City Thunder, and I do believe that is their intent, how does that leave the players on this team feeling?" She goes on to say, "What does this do to Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler and Collin Sexton and Keontae George if they think the higher-ups don't want this team to win right now? The players already were not happy with them bottoming out at the end of last season after they ended up depleting the roster at that point, and it's hard to see the light at the end of this tunnel at this point." Now, the key thing to pick out of that entire blurb is simply the fact that we thought this was a competitive team. Not only did we think, we saw, we understood, we saw the guys' camaraderie, we saw them hyping each other up and being excited about being a competitive team, being able to take off teams like the Bucks, the Nuggets, and playing really consistently against top teams in the West. Even though there were a few blowout wins, most of those came on the road. You saw them play very great basketball at home and even pick up the speed on the road and catch a couple of W's. It calls into question what it was all for. No player on any team wants to play and then lose the games consistently. That's what the Charlotte Hornets are known for doing. That's what the Washington Wizards have known to do recently, as well as the Detroit Pistons. But none of those teams love losing. Some of them become content with losing because that's all they know, particularly if you're a rookie in the league and you're just brought into the team that is known for losing. But by and large, most of the players do not particularly enjoy being in those scenarios. With the understanding of this, Collin Sexton is a guy that's going to give you the same level of effort when he's down 15 or up 2 points. Lauri Markkanen is a consistent guy in the league who's so efficient at scoring while barely having many touches on the ball. He doesn't dribble much, he's getting into his bag a little bit more, trying to expand his game, but by and large, he requires other people to set up the table for him, and he hits his shots every single game with mild exceptions. Walker Kessler has been an elite rim protector for them. You find Keontae George trying to find his rhythm and getting better as the season progresses. He doesn't always have the most consistent games, but when he catches fire like no other. And to sit there and understand that these guys are trying so hard, and even the guys that got sent away in Kelly Olynyk, Ochai Agbaji, and Fontecchio, you see a situation where those guys were legitimately trying and playing their hearts out and giving it their all with effort every single night because they wanted to win, and they were under the impression that this was going to be a playoff caliber basketball team that was not only going to make a push for the play-in, but they wanted to be in the playoffs and play some valuable games. But after the trade deadline, it seems as though the next situation, now that they've had a depleted rotation, is just that they're just going to tank again. Moving forward, she went on to say this that really hit home for me. "I find it hard to believe that anyone in the Jazz front office thought that they were going to be any better a team this season than they are. If that's the case, then they have been thinking about depleting the roster and prioritizing the future from the beginning, but that's not the sentiment that has been shared with the players. These guys thought they were going to fight for the playoffs, and that's why Jordan Clarkson opted to stay in Utah. That's why players have been understanding about changing roles and minute distribution and rotation experimentation." That is the most key part of her entire article. She brings up a very good point. If you have a team that has a lot of veteran players, that has a lot of guys that do tend to be young but are also extremely talented, they want to win games. When you have a guy like Jordan Clarkson, who is the longest tenured player on this team, who just opted into a new deal with the team, he did that because he was under the impression that this team was getting better, not taking steps back. Lauri, despite being a consistent player and never complaining, ideally If he is genuinely a star player in this league, he's not content playing on a losing team that continues to rebuild. And after they had to experience it at the end of last season, there's no way they can feel comfortable being put in that same situation after feeling as though they were going to be a playoff team. That just makes no cognitive sense. But again, this is Danny Ainge's way of doing things, and he has a strong record. So my mindset is that he has a logical reason for doing this. As much as it makes sense to go ahead and cut out the middling success of the league and just being a borderline playoff team that wins some games and goes to the playoffs but loses in the first round or second round, instead you'd rather go ahead and hope that one of your draft picks can be developed and be a genuine star and then propel you into contending status. That's understandable. In the meantime, while you have pieces that are very well put together and have the ability to win you games, if you train them to lose, losing is all they will know. And the most concerning thing is for guys like Collin and Lauri Markkanen who enjoy winning, guys like Chris Dunn who get extremely hype and play their tails off on the defensive side of the ball and make their roles, their entire niche about whatever Will Hardy and the coaching staff requires them to do. And credit to THT, he accepted being a player that just eats up DNPs for the majority of this second half of this season. It was all in hopes that they would end up making the playoffs. You see Collin Sexton finally get put into a starting role after coming off the bench at the beginning of the season, and they start winning games. He accepted having nights where he's going to score 32 points and play 34 minutes, and then also have nights where he's going to score 25 points on good efficiency, but only play 22 minutes. He accepted that. Different guys made different sacrifices for this team. And effectively at this trade deadline, the thing that went over my head is the fact that these guys are not only just basketball players, but they're human too, and they feel just the same way me and you would feel in these situations. They don't like losing. Nobody likes losing at life. And if you get paid millions of dollars to play a game that you allegedly love and you're very talented at, there's no way you can sleep well at night knowing that you gave it your all, but the expectation is that you lose, especially on a repeated year in, year out basis. In essence, this means that the front office lied to them. You could have told these guys at the beginning of the season when they started struggling and when things were looking terrible and when they had more than twice as many losses as they had wins to just go ahead and chill. Will Hardy, don't worry about coaching. Just put guys out there, let the young guys play, let Taylor Hendricks play, let Bryce Sensabaugh play. There's no point in having him in the G League. We don't plan on winning and going to the playoffs anyways. We don't plan on having meaningful playoff games in May, in April. We don't plan on having any of that stuff. So just go ahead and let the boys play, let them have fun. They could have said that, but they chose not to. They didn't convey that to the players and to the coaching staff. And even if it was conveyed to the coaching staff, which I don't believe that it was, because I view Will Hardy as being a very honest and transparent coach, as well as the rest of the guys on that staff, the players didn't know. And they were genuinely under the impression that they were going to try their tails off and play the best basketball they potentially could in order to play meaningful games at the end of the year. Because they didn't want to go to Cancun. They didn't want to go on vacation early. They wanted to play and give the fans of Utah something to cheer about, to give everybody a reason to come into Salt Lake City and pack out the arena every night. But this trade deadline, to put things into perspective, it put all that in harm's way. And that's irritating because at first I was willing to accept it. To me, it was a simple cut and dry. I tried to look at it through specifically a direct basketball analysis point of view. The simple fact of it being, we didn't want to pay Fontecchio, we didn't want to pay Olynyk, we didn't want to pay Obaji. We wanted to go ahead and just let those guys walk because they are quality players, but also get some trade value back, maybe make a big play later on, maybe in the off season and add something super talented, but just to put ourselves in a position to allow the young guys like Taylor Hendricks when he's ready to go ahead and play. And he just played last night and didn't have a great game, but he got the matchup against Kevin Durant and really showed himself and got some quality valuable minutes. To let Bryce Sensabaugh come up and play, to let some of these guys that have been middling in the two-way contract areas and just playing and being assigned to the G League to come up and get some extra burn and play some quality minutes and get their feet wet so that next year they can be even better. But I ignored the fact that Collin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, Jordan Clarkson, Keontae George, Chris Dunn, they've all been playing every single night, bar injuries, and they've been trying every single night. They haven't taken a night off. When games got close, they didn't take their feet off the gas. When they came in the fourth quarter down 15, 16, 17, 2 games ago when they were down at the beginning of the fourth against the Milwaukee Bucks, they didn't just roll over and give up. They played harder. They won the game because they wanted it more. Why would players play like that if they were under the impression that they were tanking? There's no need to. There's no need to. We've seen teams like the Pistons play decent games but lose by 6 points. We've seen the Spurs do it consistently. The Spurs are not a terrible team. But they're also tanking. So you see a lot of times they lose games, not in blowout fashion, but by 11 points, by 12 points, by 14 occasionally, by 6, by 2, by 13. They're all low point totals for the most part. But then with the Utah Jazz, this was a team where you watched the basketball games and you were excited. The fans were roaring in the arenas. Everybody was hype. Chris Dunn was sitting there throwing up a W every single time he crossed the court and went over by whoever was getting interviewed on the courtside at the end of the games. Everybody was happy. Everybody was hyped. The social media pages were jumping. But now we're in a situation where it might not be the case anymore because the depth isn't there. They don't have the help that they need to go ahead and keep pushing even harder. Lauri and the guys were like, oh, we have great pieces, but we're like one bit away from really being a really strong playoff team. And Danny said, don't worry about it. I'll strip you down a little bit more. And he took away some of the pieces that they had in their utility belt. So now they just have what they have. And if you're a player like that, do you really want to keep playing for a front office like that? Do you really want to keep giving your all? At some point, you crack inside. At some point, mentally, you don't have it anymore because not only were you not let in on the loop of what was going on, but you were blindsided like a regular fan would be. And then the question becomes, why would I want to re-sign with you? Why would I want to keep playing for your team? Your fans are great. They energize me every time. I get hype. I look in the stands. Everybody's shouting back at me. Everybody's hype with me. Everybody's behind me. But my front office isn't behind me. They aren't on the same page with me. They aren't telling me what's going on. They aren't properly articulating themselves and letting me know what I need to do this year, what the expectation is for the season. They're not telling me ahead of time that if things go a certain way, we're going to take path A. But if things go this way, we're going to take path B. And that's just what it's going to be. They don't articulate that. They just really let us go out there and play our tails off night in and night out, and then traded some of the best players we've ever had chemistry with away. We lost brothers at the trade deadline. That's what it was. They lost brothers. This was one of the closely knit teams. It puts me on par with the D'Lo and Jared Dudley Nets when they were sitting there dancing on the sideline when everybody was shooting threes and everybody was hyped. That was a fun team to watch. They had fun. They enjoyed being around each other. The camaraderie was so great. This Jazz team had that same energy. There wasn't a guy with this super huge ego that was taking all the shots, that had an opinion about everything. You had Collin Sexton getting hype when Keontae George and Jordan Clarkson would get subbed in for him and get a bucket and a timeout would get called. Who does that? Who really does that? You had Fontecchio hitting a three while Lauri was on the bench, and Lauri would be hype. You had Walker Kessler sitting on the bench, and when John Collins would get a block, Walker Kessler would be hype. And then when a timeout would get called, everybody would congratulate each other after the post games. Win, lose, or draw, they were always right there behind each other's backs. And then we sent 3 of them away. 3 of the guys that admittedly were not the greatest piece on the team, but they were still brothers that fought night in and night out. And 3 of the guys that really played some of the most games on the roster. And when you look at it through that lens, it makes things a little bit more sucky, to be quite honest. And I never really saw it that way, but this article brought it to light. So I like to shout out Tatum for bringing that to my eyes, because I do remember him talking a little bit about it to me before the season even started, back when we were in the preseason days. But I didn't think to look at it in this lens. And I'd like to think that the front office didn't either, because if they decided to, and Danny Ainge genuinely decided to deceive the players in this way, it doesn't bode well for whether Lauri decides to re-sign, considering that he already said that he loves Utah, and whether the rest of these guys decide to stay beyond the end of this year and whenever their contracts end up expiring. But again, you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm always interested to see your opinions, and I'll do my best to respond to everybody. With that being said, if you like the Utah Jazz, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, like the video, turn on post notifications, and become a member to support the channel and help me come out with some more banging content. It's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this one. And as always, good morning, good evening, good night. No matter where you are on the globe watching, thanks for tuning in. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.